if you could briefly tell us about, your journey as a creative and an artist, that would be great. But more specifically, I would love if you could tell us what ideas and elements you are currently exploring or are interested in within your practice for me.
I guess in terms of what I'm interested in, art for me is, or just being creative for me has always really been about, exploration and fun and play. And I think I still really get inspired when I like see something that attracts me and I'm like, oh, how can I use this or how can I manipulate this and like
Mm.
take the essence of what this thing is and see how I can build on it, or if not build on it, how can I present it or accentuate it. So I think at the core, before I get into like, oh, the work's about identity or it's about politics or it's about experience, I think it's about play for me. And I think I can start to build these things I've been thinking about, but I can apply them to that object the same way I could make a song and apply things I'm thinking about to the song, or I could do writing or make maybe like a piece of clothing. And I think that for me, art is like it's focused on the play and the practice of tinkering with stuff. So that's been like my main focus. And then on the extreme end of that, I think it's been like real strategic positioning. And I don't necessarily love to put those things together, like I don't love the pressure of art having to deal with strategy and like politics in the sense of like, oh, how do I get this? How do I show here? How do I sell work?
Mm.
But I think those have kind of been like two things I've been kind of hyper focused on trying to do for myself. So like keeping the art real, but also making sure that I'm able to participate in what's happening in the art world.
I can relate to that. I can relate to just the idea that you don't want to lose a sense of play within your work and dealing with like all the pressures of that within the art ecosystem. So I want to ask you how you see the art ecosystem, like what does that mean to you when we talk about structure and we recognize the fact that we're artists and we're creatives, but we also exist within a system made up of so many players, right? So I want to ask you about that. But you talked about play, and I would like to know like how are you constantly playing, within your practice, especially when you have to do it. You talked about play and then you talked about positioning. How do you make sure like you're constantly playing and then meeting the needs of those around you?
I think with the play, it's always about trying to make something new. I think so often as artists, you can get into a system, especially when you start selling work, that you're like, okay, I'm going to produce for the market or I'm going to produce for collectors that still maybe haven't gotten their work from you. I think sometimes also artists make something and everyone's like, I want one, I want one, I want that version, I want the work that's from this body of work. And I've always liked this idea of like things have to end. You can't make the same stuff forever. I remember listening to an interview with Jerry Saltz and he talks about the magic of, making fire. Caveman in the cave, you make fire and you present it to the world and people are wowed. And it's like you have to go back into the cave and like make fire or like do some new alchemy where you make a new thing. And I think that's how you keep the play and the curiosity maybe and interest. At least for me, that's what I'm interested in doing in my practice. And like I don't know if that's always so easy when people have celebrated you for other work or you're making stuff that like isn't able to sell and you have to be okay with that. And that's where the system comes into play because it's like not everything you're going to make as an artist is even for the public, right? Like some of these things you make for yourself, no one will see them. And I think it takes having a system or a strategy, let's call it, to even continue exploring and making art. I mean, I do a lot of residencies. I think that's another avenue to be able to like find support to work on new ideas where they're welcomed. So that has kind of been my approach most recently, where it's like, hey, am I traveling? Am I putting myself in situations where I can be inspired and I'm not just in the studio in this kind of routine? And then working with different mediums. Like I've been taking a lot of film photography and on my travels, I've also been recording audio. And it's like, I don't necessarily know how I want to use these things, but I'm kind of just hoarding material and like waiting for the opportunity to like look back at it and work on it.
Okay. So with that being said, when we say the art ecosystem, how do you view that? Like, what does that mean to you? Does your practice I mean, how do you feel like your practice sits within that system?
Um,
Personally, structurally, what does that mean?
It's tough, right? Because the art ecosystem's so big that I'm like, I'm sure at a level it sits in there as like, hey, this is like a Nigerian American artist. Like for a gallery, for a museum, it could literally just fit like, we want to highlight this. I think
Mm,
my arts ecosystem also speaks to like the people like, Wole, other collectors, artists, friends. Like my ecosystem is more about artists and patrons than the gallery, I guess. But I
mm,
think that's kind of maybe how I separate it. You have like fine art ecosystem, and then you have your own personal ecosystem of like your art network that's supporting you or has influence on you. And I think I've focused more on my personal art ecosystem and my network more so than on the bigger, powers that be in that way.
mhm,
So I think my work is positioned in of, at least personally, in of like my community. A lot of times I'm trying to do studio visits. I'm visiting collectors. They're turning into friends. Like we're building relationships. And I think I've kind of used my art to connect with people, and like I kind of feel like I'm like friendly in that way. And but then I guess conceptually, I mean, yeah, that's a hard. I don't know if I could really answer where it sits in that way because I don't have that perspective. It's like
mm,
I think it sits in me being like a young Black artist that is in like a major kind of like art city like New York. And there's a little bit of, with art sometimes getting like articles or recognition from publications that aren't art. Maybe it's like fashion or it's some kind of cool hype thing. I think there's also a little bit of that it sits into. And I think
mm,
I'm now trying to make sense of like, okay, what path do I want? I moved right now, I'm in my studio in Hudson Valley, which is outside of the city. So it's like essentially in the woods. And like I've kind of liked this idea of removing myself to just kind of have my focus be on the work and the craft without necessarily feeling like I need to validate it or promote it through all this kind of publication. My mindset's kind of like my art is for the people that it's for, and it can't be for everyone. So I've tried to
mm,
like position myself where I'm not appealing to like the masses or doing stuff that they're like, oh, everyone's gonna see this, and just kind of being like, yo, people will discover this work when they need to discover it. And like it's not necessarily about getting rich or being in magazines or doing all that stuff. It's about making art. I always say no
mm.
one is to like be an artist. Like I think it chooses you to be on. I never thought I was going to be an artist. I wanted to make film, and not that making films isn't art, but like I didn't think I'd be making this kind of art. And I think it just kind of like worked for what I was doing. So I'm here right now. I'm trying to figure it out.
Just randomly, can you quickly say like how you made that? Like what happened? How did you go
Oh,
from filmmaker, from wanting to be a filmmaker to, because I wanted to be an architect and I went to school for architecture and then I found myself being an artist. So I'm always curious when I hear people say like tell their stories and life just happens. So can you quickly tell
I
us?
okay, so I'll give context. My parents both are artists. My mom was in textile and did batik, and my dad did batik as well, but painted. They both painted. My grandpa was in art. Like my sister made art. So I had grown up around art and I knew it was always valuable, but it wasn't my thing. I grew up like skateboarding, playing video games, hanging out with my friends. I wasn't really settled enough to like sit down and like want to work on some art. And I think as I got older, I got really into like fashion and clothing, and that's where some of the video stuff comes in because it's like adjacent to like music video and culture and style. And I remember having an idea for a clothing brand called University, and it was meant to be like these graphic tees. This is back when like graphic tees were really popular, and I was like
Mm,
working on the packaging of the books and the concept for the brand. And that's when I started kind of early on thinking of like conceptual art or like branding concept stuff. And I remember showing that to my friends. There are these two roommates I had that are good friends, Billy and George, and they're like painters. And I was like, oh, this is a brand concept I have. And he was like, oh, that could be an artwork. And I was like, no, this is like for fashion, right? Like this is like a company I'm trying to start. And I think it was early on where they started introducing me to these other ideas of what art could be that wasn't just like rendering something in proportion, or like figuration, and it could be an idea. And I went down that rabbit hole and I was just like, oh,
Mm.
art was way more expansive for me. So these ideas of like, oh, I want to make a film, or I want to make a fashion show, or like a song, all kind of could be made under the framework of conceptual art. And that's kind of how I found myself here. It's like all the ideas I would have had anyway, I'm like, you can kind of just present them speculative within like the framework of fine art. So
Is there a connection between fashion and your choice of textile, like the durags that you use for your work? Is there a
not,
connection?
I mean, there's a connection because it's a fashion object for sure. But I
Yeah.
think for me, that stuff was more about like American and Nigerian, right? Like growing up in a Nigerian household, even though I wasn't born in Nigeria, but then also moving to Nigeria, and not one of these moves where it's like I've been going to Nigeria every summer, but like literally my family just decided to move back to Nigeria and I'd never been before. And then kind of dealing with this idea of knowing I'm Nigerian, but also not fully, like even if you leave the country for a long time, like there's a form of disbelonging or disconnection. So the idea of my dad teaching me how to wear a do-rag, but my mom
Mm.
not liking me wearing a do-rag was one of these like weird things for me where I was trying to figure out where does this object kind of like fit in my truth. I'm also a
Mm.
black person that needs to use a do-rag for my hair. So, and then you watch the Nollywood movies and there is like an aesthetic and a swag to like the guys that have the wave cap or the do-rag on, or like either the gangsters or the guys that were like in America before that came back. So that was always
Mm.
interesting to me as a kid and just as a younger person. And like, I think it's about style, but that for me as like a motif is more about living between like that being African or being Nigerian and being American.
Okay. So you talked about, when we were talking about the arts ecosystem, you talked about the personal, that is the ecosystem within the personal, and then the ecosystem as like this broad structural, professional thing. What do you think about artists like positioning themselves within the structural ecosystem, like the organization of it, the galleries, the fairs, the corporate aspect of it? Do you think, just giving the current state of things, the economy, all of that, politics, like, everything going on in the world, do you believe African artists and artists generally need that ecosystem the way it looks? I personally like the idea of a personal ecosystem because I feel we all need community. We all need that. We all need like what we feel is our community. We all need that. But then there's, on the opposite side, there's that structure that we know exists, and we know we have to, not have to, but you do the gallery shows and you might do the fairs. To some degree, you need those things. So what do you think about that? Do you think artists need that structure to be successful? And then what are your thoughts on navigating that kind of structure alone by yourself as an outsider, or within the structure, like having gallery management, having a manager? How do you see like the dynamics of all these things?
It's complicated because I think you don't need it at all, right? Like there's artists, most artists that have made art didn't have any of that. Most artists that we know and are renowned, there was no gallery system before or no robust museum like system. It was patrons and passion. And not to be a romantic about it, but I feel like at the core, when you start to think about, oh my gosh, like we could go deeper into war and the economy could get messed up and no one could want to buy work, it's like you're going to choose if you still want to make work. Even if you have to get another job and like make money to live, there's that passion of like, I still want to work. So sometimes I'm like, it's what you're choosing. Obviously, everyone wants to make work and be supported. If a good gallery, can support you and like make that easier for you. But I also feel like my experience is that there's not so much support in galleries like it seems. I think you have to think of the gallery like a store, like they want to sell something you've made that they think is valuable. So a gallery could have your work. The person may never even collect it, but they know they can sell it, but it's not for them. And when I think about it now, like, bless you, I didn't start in the commercial art world. I started grants, residencies, fellowships, because my parents, when they had their nonprofit, that's how they would be able to raise money for like art, material, and programming, was through these grants. So that already gave me the framework that you can make art without and get funding without having to even be known in this kind of commercial way. But yeah, I don't know. It's like I don't want to be like, you shouldn't, like, also I work in that system. So it'd be hypocritical for me to be like, oh, it's like overrated. You don't need that. And I've benefited from it. But I think that the issue with those systems is that they start to dictate like what matters. And it's like, I'm kind of the player one in my life, right? Like, I'm seeing my perspective. So you have to kind of put your work in a space where it feels like it matters. And I think sometimes the issue with like trying to find a gallery is that you're beholden to like, if we like you or we don't. That's why I never liked these apps, sometimes the dating apps, because they just be like, you just swipe somebody away if you don't like how they look or if it's a bad photo. And it's like, I don't like feeling like I can be dismissed in this way. So with the art world, sometimes it's like, I don't like how as artists we feel like we have to like pander or bend to how they're viewing us. Sometimes these people can be disrespectful or can just feel like they have so much power and we're so desperate. And like, I feel like I don't feel that way when I'm talking to other artists or older artists or to collectors or patrons. I feel like they're genuinely interested. They're not leveraging power. We're having conversations about the work and maybe, hey, not works about make this many, this would look nice this size. So again, not that every gallery does it, but I believe I mentioned the local network because I'm like, that actually is what matters, I think, for the work and for the journey. I only really care about what other artists think about the work. Museums, again, they matter, but like, it's an institution. Whereas like artists, I'm like, you're an individual, you're a person, especially artists I respect, and that's kind of like what I want from it. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question, like how to I do have strategies for how I've navigated it, but my views around it have changed. So that's my view on it, is that it's not necessary. And there are ways to make it to be an artist, and maybe you have to forego wanting to be a commercial artist that's selling all the time, but there's always a way to just make art and be an artist. But I think if you're talking about like, hey, how can you be a commercially successful artist that's making money? I think there are definitely like, you need a gallery. There's no way that you can, and you kind of need like a good gallery. I don't think there's a way that you can't have a good gallery and be like a commercially successful artist. And I think your gallery also needs to like have good connections and know people. And my strategy has been, how do I get to a good gallery? That's been my like strategy or my game. And that's been through the network. It's been through being able to talk to curators and like doing a lot of stuff on my end, set the groundwork and the stability for a gallery to then come in and be like, oh, this artist is already in these museums. This artist already has relationships with a lot of these curators that we would have been trying to get into their studio. This artist, I think as an artist, you have to make yourself valuable to have somebody work with you to feel like, hey, there's money to be made here. And I think that relies on like how you've been kind of contextualized and like positioned in the quote unquote fine art world. Thus the residencies, MFA, being a part of different shows and group shows and stuff like that. Primarily, it's relationships, though.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for that. Can you talk about or just mention some avenues, tools that have helped outside that structure? So let's say you wanted to position yourself to continue working, doing what you love, playing. What are some things that you have tried over the years to just keep working on that path? I think you mentioned
residencies for sure. Reaching out to collectors, people that collect your work. Yeah, like that want to support you, right? Like you guys are in this group right now. That's like a big step. and you have like a network. That means that you guys can share collectors. Hey, have you seen, a lot of times when I'm talking to collectors, I'm showing them other art to look at. Because again, you don't want to be an artist. Just rarely do I just share my art. Hey, get this. It's like, oh, these are artists that you should look at. This is a lot of the collectors I work with also, or that have collected my art, are just starting and they actually want the guidance. And I think they trust other artists to be like, oh, trust me, like this is what you might like, because we're at the ground level of it. Like we're friends with all these people. A lot of times we know what our friends are about to do before the collectors or the galleries do. So if I know my friend's going to have a museum show, I'm going to talk to a collector and be like, hey, like this guy is about to show here. Trust me, I can get you in the studio. You can see the work. And I don't want to say it's like insider trading, but there's a little energy of like that there that I think makes the proposition attractive for a collector if you're doing it that way. But I just think at the core, it's like you kind of really have to support, you have to trust that your network will support you and you guys will support one another. And like in my experience, I have friends that are at magazines and like I didn't have to pay for PR, but because we're friends, like they've been able to help me with PR in that way through their platform. Or I've had friends and artists that are like, hey, I showed so and so your work and they're interested. And I think it takes having the conversations. A lot of artists almost are shy sometimes to reach out to grab coffee with a collector, or scared to ask, hey, like, do you have any advice? Which was also another big one. Like when I was starting out, I was always that guy that was like, hey, do you have advice? I'd go to like an artist show I liked and wait patiently. Hey, I'm a young artist. My name's Anthony Akinbola. Do you have, because I think people want to see and like to help people that are like eager to learn. People want to teach, like that's in a lot of people. They want to be able to help out and feel needed, and when I messaged Wole, it was like, yeah, like you're Nigerian, and you're in art, like let's talk. And I would message galleries sometimes, I wouldn't even ask them. At a certain point, it was just studio visit ? Like I just had an energy.
I was about to say, is that how you framed the question? Like you're in arts, let's talk. Like
Yeah,
how
I
like
think I gotta look at it. I think it was like, hey, I think it was just like, hey, what's up? I don't think it was like you're in art. I didn't say it like that, but it was like
yeah.
my mindset was there. But sometimes you just gotta like ask and like you're gonna see it. Either you're gonna like the work and say, hey, yeah, let's talk, or you're not interested in the work and we don't have to talk. And like it's better to just get it out of the way versus there being any pride or shame to like, oh, I don't want to do it this way, or there's the right ways to do stuff. Like I think the right way is to do it, and to be real. Like and it can help. It might not be, some people may not answer, but like all you need is like one person.
Yeah.
And not that you should be just DMing anyone also. Like obviously you have to have some like respect, but I think there's a way where like if you feel strongly about it and there's a connection or there's something, you shoot your shot.
So a lot of young artists, like a lot of people I know, are navigating their own identity, and they're navigating it to a place where they want to build their careers, talk about what they're genuinely interested in, maybe talk about their identity. I think a lot of people are just navigating, how do I talk about my art within today's climate? What do I want to center? Do I want to center play? You talked about play earlier. Do I want to center play? Do I want to center my identity? What is important for me to talk about? So I want to talk about identity with you. I want to talk about your roots, your Nigerian roots. As someone with Nigerian roots who has built within the Western ecosystem, what is your honest reflection on building within that ecosystem? And then what do you think artists of African descent might be giving up or gaining by focusing on that ecosystem?
It's unfortunate, right? Because like I actually haven't been able to show on the continent the capacity I've wanted to. I think that there's a lot of different, it's like I can't speak much to it because I'm not as familiar with it, but I could just say like I know that like sometimes the prices don't always translate. So for an artist that's like based here to want to like find a big market, like I wouldn't want to sell artwork at the same price to somebody in Nigeria that wanted to buy the work if they didn't have, how do I say, like I'm thinking about what I would want to buy, and I'm also thinking about like how things are valued. So I'm not expecting somebody that is a fan of art but also knows they need to buy fuel and like buy, like take care of stuff to buy the art. And I just feel like when I've talked to a lot of Nigerian collectors, even in America, a lot of them are like surprised when I'm telling them what the price is for the work. Hey, this is $20,000, and it's like, oh,
Wait, say that again.
like a lot of my, like the African collectors that I know that are interested in the work, genuinely interested in the what it's about, all of that, sometimes are not able to afford it. And not because they don't have the money, but I don't think that and not even that they don't value it, but I just think they're not as familiar with like paying those prices for, like, I mean, I'll ask you, like in Nigeria, what are your works priced at? Like, how are people, buying like the work? Are they blinking if you tell them, hey, this is 30,000?
No, they're not blinking. I mean, we could also ask Wale about this. They're definitely not blinking, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's on the same level as, in the West. I don't want to say ease. I was going to say, I don't think there's the same level of ease, but I think there's a mark. So let me use $2,000 or $1,000. Like once you start going above that mark and you are at a certain level within,
Yeah.
also there's conversation about like paying in dollars. And I don't even think this is just in Nigeria. Other artists can talk about this as well. Paying in what the dominant currency is, as opposed to paying in naira, which is like, then you start going into your
Million.
converting exactly millions. So it's a very, very tricky one, especially because we know that, collectors in the West have more buying power, but you also want to be fair
Yeah.
to collectors here. It's really tricky, and it's something that I've actually thought about a lot. But yeah, I would say once you start going above 1,000, 2,000, and you are within a certain frame in your career, then it gets tricky. It gets
Yeah.
difficult. You really have to think about how you want to position yourself.
And I think that's why for me, I'm like, okay, like there are ways where it's like it's important to show in on the continent and within just the diaspora for sure. But I think with the American thing, you get the money, or with the not just American, it's European too. It's like there, if you don't participate in that, you could be missing out on potentially making money. But it's like also you have to think of the people that are buying your work. Some of these people buy it and they'll take it to auction. Some of them don't value it. Some of them are just buying it because it's something to collect. Some of them are buying it because they had to buy yours so they could buy another artist at the gallery that they really wanted. But you're like the young artist that they've just signed. So I think it's important to navigate both. But I just think that if you have, yeah, I don't know. I guess if there's other ways to make money for you. My sister, I have an older sister who's also an artist, and she like just wrote a book and is like, doesn't really sell work, but she's a professor. And
Mm-hmm.
like she's shown at the MCA and has had shows, and she's not a commercial artist. And it's like she can say no to the art world. She can speak to the things that are unjust. She can politically speak on what her views are because she's like, I'm not playing the game to be in the art world. And I do think there's a freedom to feeling like, hey, I make my money elsewhere. I don't need to deal with you to pay my light bill, you know? And I almost feel like now, like I just left my gallery, like I've been doing a lot of stuff independently. And my thought now is like, how do I create something else that makes me money so I can take the art money and put it into something that can actually sustain me? I don't necessarily want to just continue feeling like I need to make work to like pay bills or to like sustain myself. So I'm trying to get to a point where I could just be making art and like kind of remove myself from the art world. And it's like, again, whoever, I don't know, it's like there's artists I've never heard about, and I'm like on the Hauserworth Gagosian website, and I'm like on this person's Instagram, and they have 200 followers and like 3 posts, but they're just working as an artist and doing their thing. And I think with like young artists, especially young Black artists, it almost sometimes feels like we have to be in magazines. We have to be everywhere. We need to be popular and have clout. And like it takes away from the work in a way where I think if you exclude the money, it's like, why do we want to be in the museum? For me, I want to be in, may sound terrible, but it's like being in the museum kind of establishes a stability that would make people more comfortable to buy my art.
Mhm.
You know, is it that if I never get into the Guggenheim, I feel like the work doesn't matter? This is like, a European institution, and I'm making works about durags and being Nigerian and American. Like, that where there's a lot of Black institutions, African institutions, that conversation is like priority, that the work's not there. And I think sometimes as artists, because of the prestige of these places and the history, we're like, yes, we want to be in there because it validates the work. But I started to kind of feel like, well, validation of the work isn't feeding me. So then the new value is like that validation brings about stability, and then people are more interested in working with me. And I've started to approach it as like, hey, I mean, you could argue that like, oh, these museums are good because they keep the work safe, right? And they are custodians of the work. But it's like they're I mean, this goes back to like the bronzes and all the antiquities that are coming back to like Nigeria. Like, we also are able to store our culture and store our narratives. It's not that if I'm making something about African American history, Nigerian history, I have to take it to the Guggenheim for it to be safe. So my view has changed on it because I've been around a lot of it in a way where I'm like, oh, the veil and the magic of what all this is has changed so much to me,